to the disease of obesity and 4 hours of addictive mediocrity to get you through the pain of a dissociated and traumatized cult. The possibility field is exponentially vast when we're dealing with more than 90% of people in the empathic reasoning brain. Because the empathic reasoning brain reverses homelessness. We all in America, at least I'm in the 5th wealthiest county in the United States, and I drive by homeless people every single day. These people see people with an average of $150,000 in salary a day and an average house price of $1.2 million. Drive by them with the message, "We have no time for you." Because what is that homeless person going to do for me? That's reptilian thinking. Homelessness disappears. And there's a very obvious reason we have homelessness in my city. You can't build a house for less than $650,000. No one on the street can afford that. Common mathematics. Why does no one care to restructure the laws and zoning to allow tiny houses for $5,000 that every single one of them can afford? I haven't met the homeless person that can't afford the rents of a tiny house. We just refuse to pass the laws that would allow tiny houses. Tiny houses are good for the environment. They're good for mental emotional health. 42% of homeless people have PTSD. And I have a city that is committed to stupidity. It's better for firefighters to have a tiny house. If you're a firefighter, would you rather risk your house for a 5,000 square foot mansion of a rich guy that's going to scream at you if his $200 million painting goes up in flames? Or would you rather sit there with a garden hose and put out a tiny house that weighs, that's 200 square feet? Firefighting is better, good for the environment, uses less natural resources, faster to construct, cheaper, saves money in policing, saves money with graffiti. Every single known metric of well-being goes up with tiny houses. So I know what we're going to do. We're going to pass more than 1,000 laws in various building codes that preclude tiny houses. It's wonderful. Only rich people. And then we'll pay more money to the police to tell the homeless that don't have any place to go here to go over there where they don't have any place to go either. And when they sleep in their cars, we'll wake them up and shame them by letting them know they are surrounded by rich fucking reptiles who can't be bothered to go down to the rich fucking mayor and say, "Get the fuck out of this office or take care of the people that actually need help." Oh, that'd be so rude, wouldn't it? You fucking morons. What's rude is desiccating the probability field, the geometry, the mathematics of the species. What would you rather have, assuming that more is better? Would you rather have 4 plus 4, 8? Or would you rather have 4 times 4? To get exponential, geometric thinking and probability fields, you need the empathic brain. It takes too much money to pay for endless defense, to manage every contingency and fear, to get geometric expansions of well-being. You need the empathic brain. It is a mathematical fact. So what do you want if you pretend you're all about money? Do you want multiples or do you want addition? Do you want 2,000 plus 2,000? Or do you want 2,000 times 2,000? That's the difference in well-being per unit of energy invested. It's just a symbol on a calculator. But the lives that go up and the way they go up, it is a completely different world. It's beautiful. It's true. It's good. We want it. We all want to feel good and don't want to feel bad. But there's a law of mass, and there's what's called the lowest common denominator. You see, if there's one rapist in the neighborhood, that's one severely abused male, typically. Meaning, if we let one parent abuse the shit and shame the shit out of one male in the neighborhood, and he grows up into a pedophile, it's one of the statistical probabilities. Just make him feel as a child that he is utterly worthless and to be used for the gratification of his parents. And he will learn what being a pedophile is. Because whether you're an emotional pedophile or a sexual pedophile, it doesn't matter. The key message is you are smaller and to be used for my gratification. I don't want to hear the truth. I'm not going to protect you from bullying at school and all. Instead, I'd like you to entertain me now that I get home. And so if we allow one set of parents to be narcissistically incompetent, we raise a narcissistic, traumatized, maybe a pedophile, maybe a capitalist, something that lets you know that the small are there to be preyed upon, because that's what reptiles do. It knocks it down, you see? Because if there's one rapist in the neighborhood, everyone has to watch their little girls. Now, statistically, she's much safer out in the neighborhood, even with one rapist, than she is at home. Most sexual abuse occurs at home. So it's not, a big deal that there's one rapist on the outside. Her biggest threat is at home. But the point is, it just takes one reptile trained by reptiles before it feels less safe and too painful to be empathic. And this is why it is economically profitable to delete the unnecessary pain and suffering of our homeless, of our runaway children, of our veterans, and of our shame-based, chauvinistically abused men, by actually honoring the feminine side in the boy, in the man, before he learns that the only thing his feminine side is good for is to heap ridicule and shame, to rape and to violate it. Because when he learns that from chauvinistic men and chauvinistic women and other boys and other girls, we're a chauvinistic cult. We teach chauvinism. When he learns that, the only authentic expression he can have in the relationship between the masculine and feminine, whether it's a sensitive man. Why do so many men feel hatred and want to attack the femininity in homosexuals? Tease them, humiliate them, steal their money, rape them, kick them, kill them. Why? Because the man is embodying the part in themselves, the feminine side, that has been raped, humiliated, kicked, shamed, hated since birth. And why should this guy have the freedom to express his femininity when mine was hated? So you could almost call it envy. Envy. You have the audacity to bring out beauty and sensitivity and femininity and creativity. The very things I was bullied into silence about? You motherfucker. You're not getting that, because I'm never getting my innocence back. I'm never getting my beauty back. That was taken from me, and I'm too scared to even open up that wound. And there you are, a homosexual, enjoying your freedom. Fuck you. I am going to pound the shit out of you. Or there you are humiliating me because I don't know how to connect with my feminine side and your feminine side, and I'm so ashamed of my feelings. And you're bringing that up by asking me to honor the femininity in you that I cannot honor in myself. I'm ashamed, I'm humiliated, I'm going to punch you. This is the rage in a chauvinistic cult by men towards homosexuals. It's sad, it's traumatizing, and it pulls us back into the reptilian brain. When the majority of our life is empathic, and we can count on traumatic repair with certainty, we open up to the empathic brain. And when the empathic brain is loving enough to see, seeing enough to understand, well, loving enough to care, caring enough to see, seeing enough to understand, understanding enough to empathize, empathizing enough to attune, empathizing enough to get feedback on the attunement. How am I doing? Is this your perfect orgasm, or should I move my finger a little bit to the other way? How am I doing? Attuning. Do you want me to say it like this or like this? Would you like me to hug you at this intensity or at this intensity? I want to see you. I want to attune to you so your well-being goes up, so that you meet all your human needs and move on to preferences. That's me loving you. How am I doing? Give me some coaching. Great, I'm going to do that. How do you feel now? This is how the virus of love is transmitted from one empathic human being to another. Through competency. We're such chauvinists, we haven't even bothered to learn. We study flying a plane for 6 years. We don't teach loving for 1 fucking minute. We're morons. We're morons. Well, more accurately, our cult is morons, and it turns us into morons, and then we live within our moronic cult. We don't learn how to love. We don't learn how to measure. That's part of learning how to love. You got to learn how, is this love, is it not? You have to measure. We don't learn that either. It's amazing. So, empathic human beings who love create more empathic human beings who love. Because when that abundance of I'm meeting my needs by a competent person who is focused on my well-being, what do I feel? I feel pleasure. I feel trust. I feel excited. I feel enthusiastic. I feel joy. I feel safe. What's the synergy of all those feelings? And I feel grateful. I love this person. We are one. He's treating me competently the way he would treat himself. We are one. Together, friends, we are one. We are talking about less than 1% of 1% of 1%. We are talking about less than 1 in 1,000 people does this well. There's nothing wrong with the people when they're born. It's just by the time they've been taught to ignore their mother's abuse, to be hit every time dad's drinking beer, and haven't received a single hour of emotional literacy. It's after all that Well, what can you expect? You expect someone to go through the barrage of humiliation, shame, and stupidity that is high school and come out competently knowing how to love themselves and then love another human being? Are you a fucking moron? Look at, you don't set fire to someone's house, pour gasoline all over it, and then expect a beautiful remodel. No, that's stupidity. You should expect, with the amount of gasoline, timber, nails, abuse, and shame that we pour on our youth, and then set it in flame, you should expect exactly what we have today. Teenagers shooting up schools and saying, enough is enough, you fucking morons. When are you going to teach me to be a human being in a world that actually matters and that you're caring enough for to sustain? Oh. Well, you see, we're fucking morons who were taught by fucking morons, so we don't have a good answer. So let's look at the iPod. Another time, son. Another time. Maybe we'll pay a little bit more attention if you shoot up another school. But it's doubtful because we don't know what we're doing. And we don't care enough to find out. We don't care enough to love ourselves, let alone care enough to see you. This is adult love. And we're surrounded by children who don't know what they're doing. And don't know that they don't know what they're doing because incompetent people never understand just how incompetent they are because they're incompetent. Makes perfect sense. So the thing to grasp, though, is the mathematics. We are sitting. We have within our brain the software, the desire to access that software, to create more well-being and reduce more unnecessary suffering than we could possibly imagine. We all want to feel good and avoid feeling chronically bad. And in a reptilian environment, we do that with reptilian thinking and protocols. In a limbic environment of instinctual emotional outbursts, we protect ourselves by meeting and matching the same. In an empathic environment with reason and intelligence, the amount of well-being we can create is enormous. But we have to understand the science of femininity, the science of the psyche, the science of that which is within, with the same complexity as we understand the chemical tables and chemistry on the outside. As good materialist, chauvinistic, people, we have studied the outer science. We have not even begun to grasp that the study of the psyche is exponentially more intelligent because it doesn't take trees and chemical plants to do it. You don't have to destroy the outer world to become masterful in here. And as you become masterful in here and learn to stop creating toxic dumps of shame and rage, you don't have to do it on the outside to remind you what you're doing on the inside, because you won't pay attention to the inside because you're a chauvinist that values yang more than yin, the outer more than the inner. So if you don't pay attention to the inner, you have to create what you won't pay attention to on the outer, and then you learn out there. We're growing machines in a game called life that's about winning, at creating more sustainable human well-being than has ever been created on the planet before. Becoming a transcendent species where we understand that we are a unit in a field consciousness that is 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times more complex than our own. Do you understand that in the fractal nature of reality, we are a part of it all? So if your zoom in lens is 1,000,000 miles in size, we're part of an organism that's 1 million miles in size. If your zoom-in lens is limited to your human body, the cell within the organism, trillions of cells within this body, if we identify as the cell rather than being part of a larger body, the amount that we can participate in is much smaller. It's just, as one single cell among trillions, it's rather small. But it being a part of something great, participating, understanding that we willingly and freely choose to be part of something bigger than ourselves. This is the ultimate orgasm, the ultimate fulfillment, the ultimate release. To willingly say that I want to be a part of something more intelligent than my family, more intelligent than my country, more intelligent than my species, more intelligent than my planet, part of something bigger. Of course, it's a start to love oneself enough to be able to love another human being and to be able to move out, it's a start. And it's wonderful. So how do we get there? The first thing to understand is the mathematics are clear. When you have a population in the transcendent region of the brain, not just the empathic, the transcendent, we're dealing with multiples of multiples, not 2 + 2 = 4. We're dealing with 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. We get into a probability field, a possibility field that is so big in its efficiency of creating grace, creating healing, creating awareness, creating joy. Because we want a car so that we can get somewhere, looking good so that we can feel good. And we want a computer so that we can make money, so that we can buy something, so that we can take it home, so we can eat it and feel good. We have a very tedious roadmap on the path to, in its crudest forms, eating, sleeping, and fucking. Chimpanzees sleep as long as they want every day, eat plenty of food almost constantly, and fuck multiple chimpanzees when they feel horny. We have made things a lot more difficult in our infinite wisdom as a cultured species. No, you can't sleep. You got to get up and work hard. And you work hard so that you make money. And then you make money so that you can spend it on things that will make you more money. And then that's a very stressful thing, so you have to make more money so that you can spend it on healthcare to repair all those stressful diseases. And you can't afford good organic food the way the chimps can. They just eat good organic food for free. No, you can't afford good organic food. You gotta save your money and do this and do this. And then you've got to go to a school that you don't like, and then because otherwise women won't want to fuck you. If you don't go to a good school, they don't want to fuck you. So you got to spend 15 years going to this fucking school. So and then this, and then you got to do this and this. All so what? So you can sleep less than a chimp, eat less healthy food than a chimp, fuck less than a chimp, and destroy the planet in the process. This is cult. This is culture. To make the path towards eating, fucking, and sleeping as tedious, as painful, and as circuitous as possible. You say, I've got to buy this clothes and do this and wear this and this and this and look in this way and then say these words and then go away and then play this game and this and this and this and then she'll come over to my house. The chimp just walks up and starts fucking. Why not? It feels good. This tortured path, and this is one of the interesting measures. You can tell the stupidity of the cult by how uncertain and how circuitous and how energy intensively boring it is to get from every single person in that cult being able to reliably eat, sleep, and fuck. It's one good measure. So if you take chimpanzees and impose culture on them, and after 500 years of culture, the chimpanzees don't have enough money to buy the organic food they used to be chewing on for free. There are loser chimpanzees who don't have sex because there's all kinds of weird rules that the cult changes from time to time about what is and isn't fuckable. And there are people that are rushing around trying to be fuckable, so they're working hard with it, and then that's painful, so they have addictive substances, so they're not sleeping, and the environment that they're in has been desiccated by the impact of this culture. And you say this is progress? This is not intelligence. The culture is a violation of intelligence. Unless it creates more well-being than the chimps, more reliably, with less energy. And we've generally killed off, with chauvinistic rape and murder and betrayal, most of the indigenous peoples that could have taught us to do more of that more intelligently than ourselves. Well, dumb people do dumb things. When we get into that realm of transcendence, where the greatest need and the greatest joy is to be part of something beautiful, good, and true that is bigger than ourselves, when we understand that the way to enter the empathic and the transcendent brain is not to make all the substances that introduce short-term transcendence through psychedelics and LSD and put them on Schedule 1 and throw everyone in jail. Nixon was a reptile. Reptiles are frightened of transcendent thinking because transcendent thinking takes the power center out of the reptilian brain into a higher brain. And what's a reptile like Nixon going to do in that? They can't cope. It's too scary. It's too unknown. Let's throw all those people into jail. You have to get there by focusing on the lowest common denominator, our homeless and our abused children and our women. When every homeless and abused child in this cult is certain of their survival and security, has a sense of love and belonging, has dignity and self-esteem, is developing their gifts, bringing them out into the world, they will become transcendent human beings because it is the seventh need in the hierarchy of needs. It is a need to have meaning. It is a need to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. Every single human being in history that meets these survival lower needs, etc., reaches for something more, a spirituality, a planetary drive. If we want to live in a world with such that it begins by helping the weakest, smallest, most traumatized, most shame-based people inside ourselves, which means becoming emotionally and traumatically illiterate. And then it means doing so on the outside, which means advocating for our homeless and our children and our women and our elderly and our minorities. And then you spread the virus of love, because love emerges in the process of confidently, consciously, scientifically going about that process. To love enough to care enough to see enough to understand enough to empathize enough to attune enough to succeed at what? Spreading the virus of love in the fulfillment of another human being, learning the mastery of self-love as they experience the fulfillment of their human needs, which delivers another competent and beautiful human being back into the cult. This is the journey. And 1,000 people doing that can create an exponentially higher amount of well-being per unit of energy than 1,000 people doing the protocol of our cult, which is to spend more energy than any cult in human history, 102 metric tons of garbage per capita, 90,000 gallons of gas, 1,500 metric tons of CO2 in the atmosphere per every human lifetime in America. To create more mental emotional disease, more suicide, more incarceration, more addiction than many cultures in human history. We are spending more energy than we have ever spent as a species to be so miserable that more people are killing themselves than the number of car accidents and car fatalities. This is a staggering testament of stupidity and cruelty that is shoved down the throat of the cult without ethics, there's no legitimacy to a cult that uses this amount of energy to create this amount of misery and will not take care of its own people because it's spending $8 trillion to jack up the debt for the next generation, to terrorize the world, to fight a war on an emotion. I mean, you have to sell the war on terror to an emotionally illiterate cult because any emotionally literate person says, do you mean to say that you are fighting a war on an emotion? You are fighting with an emotion? Is that what you're saying? Oh, you're fighting people who have the emotion. Now, they feel terrified and are spreading the disease of terror because you've bombed them and given 1 million of them PTSD and blah, 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 blah. And you're going to make them feel less terrified by sending drone attacks to their weddings. Is that the plan? Oh, I see. You're a bunch of fucking morons consuming vast amounts of energy to dish out hate and cruelty to yourselves, your children, and the planet because you don't know what the fuck you're doing because you've never got a single hour of competent emotional training. You've just learned the law of the alligator from your school, where the bullies picked on the smallest person, and you came out knowing that. So you're going to be the biggest bully. But you're not going to be happy. Bullies are as depressed and miserable as their victims over time. That's what the data shows. America is as miserable as the countries it bombs over time. That's what the data shows. We just work a lot harder at it, and we work even harder to cover it up and pretend that we're wonderful and we have no flaws because we're shame-based and shadow-averse. The evolution on this planet that is relevant to our survival is the evolution of the human brain. And what the experience of evil is an unspeakable regression from the heights of empathic transcendence and knowledge and intelligence down to the hatred and helplessness that a small person feels when the big gang up on them and no one comes round to help. And that hatred and helplessness is so toxic and so painful that the victims of those abuse will willingly destroy themselves as long as they can give some of that helplessness and pain back to the idiots who gave it to them in the first place. We cannot free the consciousness in our people from the reptilian brain without creating an empathic environment that lets the reptilian brain know I can let go because I'm dealing with human beings. We cannot free the empathic part of the brain that is still primarily focused on self into the transcendent regions of the brain without creating a culture that is so empathic that the joy of acknowledging and honoring our unity and oneness with something bigger than ourselves is more beautiful and more desirable than the risk that we ask ourselves to pay when we understand that we are one. Because when you understand that you are one, it doesn't prepare you to defend against a perpetrator who does not know they are one with you. It prepares you to collaborate in a more elegant and sophisticated fashion than this planet has ever known. It prepares you for the geometries of exponential well-being. It does not protect you from sociopaths who are committed to pulling and destroying and exploiting that system because they have not had their wounds healed. Evil is a feeling that nature gives us to remind us that we're way off course. And the greatest evil that I've experienced is my therapists and my community leaders sexually violating, psychologically violating, chauvinistically dishonoring the feminine self in me that emerged in the transcendent state induced by my first psychedelic experience. And in a chauvinistic abuse cult, you are, of course, going to be put in jail for your own good for having a transcendent experience because reptiles are afraid of the unknown. Because reptiles project that the world is a scary dog-eat-dog place. Dogs don't even eat dogs, but they project that. And then anything unknown is terrifying. Because anything unknown is feminine. The unknown is 99% of all that is. When my innocence, my money, my time, my vulnerability, my trust was given to Peter Sandhill to facilitate my first psychedelic journey to try and break through the programming of reptilian thinking in an abuse protocol that was childhood and school, in what is at times an abuse protocol that is doing business in America, and what is at times an abuse protocol of being friends or lovers in America by other abuse survivors, I asked for help. And in a reptilian protocol, the Human Awareness Institute would, of course, be more frightened. When you're fear-based, you would, of course, be more frightened of, oh my gosh, what if other reptiles find out about our reptilian behavior and we lose rank, we lose money? My gosh. And so they had a meeting where the only person who wasn't present was the only person who needed to be at the center of the meeting, was the only person who needed to communicate the information, was the only person who asked to be there. Please listen to me, was the request. And so they excluded the sexual abuse survivor from the person they had chosen and trained. They excluded him to develop a strategy to protect the abuser and to silence the truth at the expense of their client, at the expense of the public, at the expense of the culture. And this is what reptiles do. It doesn't matter that your name is the Human Awareness Institute. The protocol of a reptile is secrecy, because the world isn't safe. You've got to protect against the truth. And your clients aren't safe. They're the enemy. Got to get rid of them somehow. Got to, And so the game that a parent, an abusive parent, an abusive therapist, an abusive organization, an abusive government plays is, we're doing this for you. You understand? We're spending your children's money. We're bombing 1 million innocent Iraqis for you. We're doing this for you. We're destroying the future for you. And we care about you and blah, 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 blah. And all your pain is not our problem, you see. The Human Awareness Institute said that helping to repair the pain of a sexual abuse survivor was not their problem. Why would it be? If we help this person or acknowledge the abuse, we'll have less money in the short term. People may be angry at us in the short term that we turn sexual predators on our clients and don't even bother to disclose that they don't have a license, that we haven't bothered to train them well. We don't care about our people that we pretend to be loving in all these different ways. That might hurt our reputation. So what do we have to do to spend as little time, as little money, and make as few changes as possible to have this go away? Let's try and get them to sign an NDA and then just tell them it's not a high issue. So that's what they tried to do. I didn't sign the NDA. But the reason I believe that this is important to acknowledge is my parents were hippie, new age liberals, vegetarians, passive solar homes, this and that and the other. None of that addresses chauvinism. None of that addresses trauma or emotional literacy or childhood abuse. So you have a very nice passive solar home in which you are traumatized into states of sheer terror and locked into those states in your body. Passive solar home is lovely. Your teachers at Waldorf school traumatize you into terror and shame and then cast you out. The buildings had lovely rounded corners. But when you're dealing with a psychologically illiterate cult with an abuse history and system it hasn't dealt with, all the rounded corners in the world do not compensate for a child that is terrified of the truth that is within, because it gets them punished. When you are terrified of yourself because the grown-ups around you are terrified of the truth that is within you, because the truth that you have within you as a child is the truth that is outside of you in your parents. And when your parents do not want to deal with their shadow, when your teachers do not want to deal with their shadow, when your government does not want to deal with your shadow, and when the self-importance, goody-two-shoe liberal parents of your peers do not want to deal with their shadow, it is given to the child who internalizes it as a contract of survival. That is not a recipe for becoming a parent, by the way. To understand that the smallest part, that the most powerless part in the group is asked to carry the biggest burden and then blamed when they fail, shamed when they fail. That is not intelligent. It's just what we do to our children. It's how we break their spirits and blame them for it. It's how we break their hearts and then complain that they're uncommunicative. We do it over and over again for 500 years. And the power of understanding the pattern is in knowing that we are spending more energy. We are spending 1,000 times more energy to create suffering than it would take to create well-being. But the law of empathy states that you begin with the poorest, the most traumatized, the most lonely, the youngest, the smallest, the women, the most vulnerable, the people who are in the most pain. That's how you build a transcendent cult. You focus on the people who are in the most pain. You heal the wounds that engaged their reptilian brain. And when their reptilian brain trusts you, because you're not a fucking moron, the reptilian brain releases the consciousness and you have another empathic human being. When you participate in competent cultural training of that human being, you now have a wealth generator of well-being in your midst. And when you do that at scale, you have something that we've never seen in our version of history, the last 12,000 years. That you have something you've never seen before. You have an intelligence released that is exponential and takes us into realms of the unknown, something we will not do until each of us as a culture deals with trauma. This is about love for the species. And in order to love a species, you have to understand how you're poisoning it. How you and me and you and you and you, how our therapists, how our parents, you have to understand the abuse pattern. If you have any chance of getting out of the maze of pathological shame, of spending more time, like my therapist spent more time and more money trying to suppress the secret and dodge around the truth than they ever spent trying to heal the victim of their abuse. That's what you do in a fucked up abuse cult. You spend more money to make it worse, more energy to make it worse than it would take to make it better. Because in a shame cult, the truth is the enemy. Who broke the vase? I did. Whack. In a shame-based abuse cult, the truth is the enemy of the wounded child. When we produce wounded children who are emotionally illiterate to a traumatic degree, they stay wounded child on the inside. Whenever trauma or threat hits, they go back to wounded child. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And you cannot take responsibility as a wounded child in this domain. Evil is the exploitation, the violation of, the waste of what is most precious in order to create vast amounts of unnecessary suffering. When my school, when my community, when my therapists fought the healthy impulses of transcendence within the psychedelic session, fought it, feared it, attacked it, and then shoved me out of the community for telling the truth. And this was the best cult that I'd found in America, meaning it wasn't obvious I was dealing with reptiles. This was the best place that I'd found. But they're as traumatically illiterate, emotionally abusive, shame-based, ignorant, regressed as anyone else. They just have a lot more sex, which escalates the abuse. When I understood that, and I looked at my parents, seemingly above average intelligence, more interested in the environment, passive stuff, all this stuff, traumatic, reptilian, abuse thinking, regressed children, playing abandonment games, hitting their children, shaming their children constantly, unable to take responsibility in a very nice vegetarian passive solar home. You realize this is the best this cult has to offer, and they don't have a clue what they're doing. They're taking energy to make things worse. Well, the brilliant thing of knowing this is when you understand that people are not the enemy, that ignorance and stupidity is the enemy, and you understand we're all ignorant, we're all dumb, well then it makes sense to embark on 500 hours of emotional literacy. Read these books, do this, this, and this, change, see the pattern here, see it in here, see it in here. You are infected as an American with the many programs our cult has set up to abuse you. You are infected. But at least you can name the disease, acknowledge it, start apologizing for some of the impact, stop doing as much of it when it's not addictively necessary. I don't have to hurt myself frantically right at this moment. I'll give myself a few hours of relief and rest. This is an incredible freedom to start admitting the wound, to start understanding that in many ways we are sicker than the races of people we killed off who lived beneath our feet on these lands 500 years ago. And we were too dumb to integrate the gifts of our ancestors. And so we are reinventing the wheel with a tremendous amount of unnecessary suffering.